welcome to our channel. Today we are in Homosassa, Florida. We're in, it's basically central West Coast Florida. Really good fishery. Now that we call home, me and Stephanie now call home. We have 6 acres off on the management area, the wildlife management area out here, and hopefully soon to have a lodge and guide service in Homosassa, hoping for 2022. But being that I am from Louisiana, we fished all over Florida, and this felt the most home place for us. And it is a lot like Louisiana, a lot of ponds, a lot of open water, outer bays where they actually have grouper and stuff here, but nice speckled trout, which we're gonna do in a little while. But they have the interior marshes, which are loaded with redfish and jacks and snook and all these great fish. The difference between here and Louisiana is it's solid rock bottom. It is limestone here. It is probably the most dangerous area I've ever fished in my life. You really have to know it and really have to learn it. And you have these four tide swings a day that are 2 feet. Right now we're on a full moon, so we got a big falling tide. So the way this place is fished is it's window fished. High water, you go in, you redfish. Falling tides, you go out and you go trout fish and stuff like that. So we are in the marsh. We just got in here. We got a hard falling tide. It probably started falling about 2 hours ago, so we got 2 to 3 hours left. We're gonna try and hook a couple redfish in here on some live shrimp, maybe some plastics, and then we're gonna hurry up and get out of here and go speckled trout fishing. Stay tuned, let's see what we can do. We fished this a handful of times and had some success. When it's on, it's on. When we catch them really good. When it's slow and we don't have the right tides, it's a very tough fishery at that point. So lot to learn here. If you come out here and fish Homosassa, Crystal River, be very careful. Idle around, trolling motor. I have put more hours on my trolling motor here, fishing here, than I have my actual big motor. You just gotta learn it and learn the lay of the land. Wintertime helps a lot when the water gets low to really see all the undulations. Even running the channels is a learning curve. You know, it's a neat place, but that's why these fish can hide. Not everybody's gonna fish it, and it's not ever gonna get overfished. So we're lucky to fish out here this morning. Tide's falling so hard, the boat's flying backwards. So let's try and sneak in here and catch some redfish. First cast, first fish. We tried on that other bank over there, a little too shallow. The water's falling out fast. I put the shrimp in the water, he was jumping like crazy. And it's a redfish, but not the one we're looking for. A little rat red, but good way to start the morning. A little tug of the line, you know? That's the way to start it. Stephanie's first cast, she's got one on too.
A little one.
What is it, speckled trout? Flip them in here. Snook.
Yeah.
Snook, baby, snook. Good way to start the morning. So Stephanie just had a big redfish on, and as soon as I grabbed the camera, it got off. And then 2 casts later, I hooked a decent one. Definitely one to eat. But he's still a flipper. Oh, it's a big snook. It's a big snook. Let's see. Let's see if we can flip him. Ooh. I don't know. Let's try. Can't make a flip on him. Ooh.
Nice.
We got a big, decent snook. Decent snook. So we're gonna put them back in the water and get back after these redfish. What you got? Redfish? Redfish? Coming in. we went and did some red fishing, and actually all I did was some snook fishing. I didn't catch any redfish. Stephanie hooked a really big one, popped the line, my fault. I only had 20-pound leader, not 30-pound. And 20's a little light for all these oyster reefs. We were catching them real shallow, so they were taking off like lightning out of there. So we ended up landing a couple redfish, a couple snook, and now we're at the bottom of the tide. It's getting ready to stop, so we're gonna hurry up and run out to the outside edges and go see if we can't put some speckled trout in the box. And we'll go from there. That's gonna be kind of it. It's still hot. It was stagnant today. It was no wind early this morning, good tide, but a full moon, and made the water real stagnant. So we're gonna go see if we can catch some speckled trout. It's been real good, but obviously the night of the full moon, the fishing is always gonna get slower. But those 2-3 days before and the 2-3 days after are gonna be epic days, and we're getting really good reports from locals here how good the fishing's been the last couple days. So I don't know if I fell on a full moon night, I didn't look, but you know, we'll know about the trout fishing here shortly. So let's see what we can do. Alright guys, we're back from Inshore fishing today in Homosassa, our new hometown. Loving the fishing here, can't wait to be guiding here soon. I'm going to go over some of the stuff we use and some of the stuff I've learned fishing here recently. I mean, I've only been fishing this area for a short period of time, but I got some really good guys that are teaching me what I need to know, every question I have, stuff like that, so I want to pass it along to y'all. So first of all, we did really good on the redfish and snook. A little slower on the trout bite, but we waited till the tide was kind of stopped before we went out there. And one thing about these fish down here is they're very tide dependent. So we used a popping cork. I use Boat Monkey Float, not sponsored by them or anything. As you can see, the price tag is still on them. I'm not sponsored by them. I just like their float. I like the sound that this cork makes. It really mimics a shrimp, which is very common for a speckled trout. With these redfish and snook down here, they don't do the pop. You know, the pop thing's not a big thing. You just throw it out, let it sit, and let it float. One thing I do is I tie about a foot to 16-inch leader. No longer, because all the oyster shells here and the fluctuation in tide, these fish are very tide dependent. So you have to get the cork moving. If the cork's hanging up all the time, you won't catch a lot of fish here. They are depending on this tide. The hook I was using was a number 3 circle hook from Gamakatsu. Great hook. I love Gamakatsus, especially if you don't get a ton of bites. If you want to land them, that's the way to land them. The leader is just a Seagull fluorocarbon 30. I've run 20 before. I use 20 in Louisiana. 20's a little light here. You really have 30. These fish are really, really jacked up with all this salt. The amount they move, they're very athletic fish is what I would call them. Because there's 2-3 foot tide swings, I call them athletic. They move a lot, they run a lot. So when they hit like a freight train. And that 20-pound is just not enough for some of these runs that we've had on. We've popped a couple at the knots. So the 30 seems to be the ticket. So let's talk about speckled trout. Even though we didn't catch a lot today, I'm going to go into what we use. I use Death Grip jig heads. And this is a local jig head from Louisiana. But actually one of my neighbors at my house here actually uses them and orders online. So obviously they got a little bit bigger following. Captain Lane in Louisiana, who's now in Delacroix, used to be in Lafitte in our area. He makes these, and these things are deadly. One, they have a really strong shank on them. Two, they don't tear lures up. The way Death Grip he calls it is actually a bunch of basically almost like push-on connectors where that lure is going to slide up and it's going to snug up. It's not going to cut the lure with a little spike or anything like that like the old school jig heads did. What I paired it with was a matrix shad. Matrix shad is another local thing in Louisiana, which I have finding a ton of success with here with the speckled trout. I'm not catching a lot of throwbacks, catching a lot of good quality fish. I run a lot of clear colors here because the water is so clean. So this one is, once again, not sponsored by any of these. You can see $12.29 a pack for the large pack. Death Grip Jig Heads doesn't have one on it, but they should have one on it too. This one is the Magneto. They make a Magneto, a Shrimp Creole, and one other color that's all clearish colors. I kind of stick with this. Unless the water gets real dirty, then I'll go to a chartreuse, which is called their lemon head. But this is a very good bait for reactions. It's got a paddle tail that when it pops or when you jig it, it's got a big swing to it, which just makes that fish react to it. Like I said, when I put them on these Death Grip Jig Heads, they are like glue. Not as much as say a gulp when it dries up, but pretty darn close. It's gonna stay on there, it's gonna pull, and it's not going to, I mean, when you slide it off, you gotta work it back down it. It's not gonna tear the lure up. I can put that lure right back on it. So, highly recommend these Death Grip Jig Heads. When I'm fishing trout, I won't go with a 16-inch leader. I'm running a 2.5, trying to keep it, to give you an idea, because some of these trout are up in 2-3 feet of water and some are in 4 or 5 feet of water. I will run a 3.5, 4-foot leader if I'm fishing the 4 or 5 foot of water, and I will run a 2.5 foot leader if I'm fishing the 3 foot of water. I want to try and keep about 6 inches off the bottom. If you let it get too long, it gets in that grass, they won't find it. They'll come looking at that cork and they won't find it. But when I'm fishing a popping cork, I will run a 1/4 ounce jig head. When I am free lining and fishing for redfish and stuff, because I use these matrix to sight fish these redfish and snook down here. I've caught some big snook on these. They actually make a matrix mega. Well, I'll go over with y'all and talk more about snook fishing. When I'm fishing those free line, I'll run a Death Grip 1/8 ounce jig head. I just like that 1/8 ounce. It's just enough where I don't have to go weedless and catch on these oyster shells and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we were using today. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We've got plenty more to come. I think we've got 4 or 5 more already made, and we're going to keep letting these things roll out. The other thing I want to tell you too, I've been fishing out of McCrae's, and I hope to continue to fish out of there for a long period of time. But McCrae's has these, they're called title charts. And they literally have them inside where it has all the moon phases and all the title charts, and I thought that was really cool because we don't get a lot of service out there. I literally get one of these every month from there if I'm fishing the Homeless Ass area. Take a picture of it, it's in my phone, and I'll have access to all my tide charts because a lot of times we just don't have service in the areas that we're fishing out there. And the tide is so important here on the flips. The other thing I'm going to tell you, one more tip about this area. If you want to explore, it is a very dangerous area. I thought Louisiana was dangerous. This place is deadly. I mean, it eats props and lower units up. It is the same thing as Louisiana as far as the shallow ponds and all that stuff. The difference is it's all rock bottom, solid rock. And then, mark my word, I literally broke a crankcase off in a 300 my first time down here, just not knowing, and I was probably 2 miles offshore. It's solid rock, and the tide swings are 2 to 3 foot a day, 4 times a day. So you can get yourself, and that's what happened to me. I had to run down the same area 3 times, not a problem, but it was all on high tide. I came in on a low tide once, didn't realize the amount of swing, and it got me. So if you're gonna fish this area, the biggest tip I can give you is if you're gonna go explore and go back in ponds and go back in creeks and crevices like I've been doing lately, go when the high, well, start on the coming up tide, and if you can get in there while the water is low coming up, you'll be able to get out of there. You got 4 hours or so to work your way back. Anytime you get super shallow, you can hang tight, it'll come up a little more. It's a fast moving pace, and you'll be able to explore. And it's really tough to leave when that happens, when the water starts falling. And I almost got caught the other day. I actually put a nice scar on the bottom of my boat. But you gotta get out of there, because if you get caught in that falling tide, it could be an area you got through back there, 1.5 feet. You're not getting out of there without tearing up your boat. So that's what I'm telling you about this place. Be careful, have your C2 membership when you're down here. That saved my behind. And my insurance was up to date on everything. But subscribe and like our channel, and we'll see you next time.